Thank you. The planning board meeting for, is this a planning board meeting or is this a workshop?
It's a workshop.
Planning board workshop for May 22nd, 2025 is called to order at 6:05. First, do roll call. Dr. Benoit?
Here.
Dr. Roberts?
Here.
Ms. Ramos?
Here.
And the chair is here. Ms. Menard will not be here. I'm not sure whether Mr. Porter.
Mr. Porter and Osier.
Mr. Porter and Mr.
Awesome.
Osier will not be.
Are also not going to be here. Okay, great. What's next order of business? What comes next?
We do have minutes for approval.
Oh,
Mr.
yeah, that's
Chairman.
right. We do have minutes approval. If you could look over the minutes from the previous meeting and let us know if you have any comments or corrections. If not, we'll take an order to take a motion otherwise.
I wasn't here, so I can't.
I also was not here.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes
As presented?
as presented.
As presented, we have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. The minutes are accepted as presented.
Mr. Chairman, seeing that the board is not voting on any items today, I think item 4, 5,
Yep,
and 6 are actually
that's what I was thinking
not
too.
relevant, and you could
I
probably go
agree.
right to item 7 if you choose to.
Excellent. So, with that, tonight's topic is, this is our second workshop. It's a presentation on the General Assembly 2023 land use and zoning legislation. So, did you want to give that an introduction, or should we?
I think I'll just turn it over to Supriya, who's
Okay.
worked on this flow chart, and she's going to be giving us an update on where we stand with the update of the zoning and planning regulations, and has a presentation, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Supriya.
Okay, I'll get started. So good evening, members of the board and the community members. Thank you for being here in spite of the very difficult weather. So this is the second public workshop of the updates to zoning and subdivision regulations. My name is Supriya Kelkar. I'm the senior planner and urban designer with Innes Associates, who is the consultant on this project. We also have a working group that has advised us throughout this process, and we have been working very closely with the town staff, Mark and Bobby, in this process. So I just want to go over the timeline of this process, the community engagement that has happened up to date, because this will be the last community outreach effort in this process. So this project kicked off in April 2024. Yeah, April 2024 with a joint meeting. In August of last year, we had the first public workshop, just informing everyone what this process will be like. In September, we had a Pumpkin Fest outreach. So unfortunately, in all of our outreach efforts, somehow the weather doesn't seem to cooperate. So it was quite stormy that day, but we still had a lot of people visiting our booth, asking questions. And that was also the day that we kicked off the online survey, just asking people if they have any doubts, concerns. This survey, up till today, more than 170 people have taken the survey, and all of the summary results have been provided to the town. So they can analyze what doubts and concerns the community members have. And now we are here in May for the second public workshop. This is going to be more of an informational session. So just a background and overview of all the changes that have come through and what our next steps are going to be. So in the 2023 and 2024 legislative session, the Rhode Island legislature enacted a lot of changes to the zoning and land laws. This was done by the intention and concern about the significant housing shortage and affordability in Rhode Island. But what it did was, because the state changed the law, the town was out of compliance with the zoning laws. So this process was basically updating all of the zoning and subdivision regulations. I just want to take a moment on this slide that in 2024, when we kickstarted this process, we were incorporating all the updates of the 2023 legislation. And in the middle of that, the 2024 assembly happened, which brought forward more changes. So basically rendering everything that we did up till that point redundant. So we had to go back and update all of that again. So since you're seeing me here since a year, I just wanted to let you know that that's why this is taking so long. So again, the goals of this process was increasing housing supply, streamlining the development so the projects pass the pipeline sooner, and then supporting mixed-use development, and also addressing zoning restrictions and bringing uniformity throughout. These are few of the key sections, actually no, these are all of the key sections that have been updated, changed, have new language. Few of the other things that the town have also been doing parallelly to this process is updating the solar ordinance, retail marijuana, and also modernizing the use table. This was not part of the MTAP program, which is sponsored by the Rhode Island Housing, but I just want to keep it in the process. So I'll just be going through the key highlights of every item. So adaptive reuse. So what adaptive reuse did was that adaptive reuse for converting any commercial building into residential or mixed use developments would be permitted use by right. I just want to point out that for every section, I'm just going over the key highlights. All of these items have already gone through the planning board process, so the text is publicly available for anyone who wants to take a deeper dive. These developments would also be exempt from off-street parking requirements, and overall what this did was curtail the town's authority to limit the density on these projects. So again, just another way to have more housing through adaptive reuse.
So, Supriya, just pause on this for 1 second. So adaptive reuse, basically, if there was a commercial use or a commercial building in your community and you wanted to convert a portion of that building, at least 50% to residential or 100% to residential in some circumstances, that is now a use that is allowed by right.
Yes.
Doesn't require, town council, zone change, special use permits, or anything like that. You're allowed to come in, and if you submit and you meet the criteria under that statute, you can convert that building to up to and exceeding a 50% residential use. That is something that is happening currently, and there have been some questions back and forth for a property, property located that had been formerly used as a banquet facility here in town, and that is undergoing adaptive reuse project currently.
Okay. So the next one is unified development. Sorry.
One follow-up on that. Is that development limited to the original footprint of the formerly commercial property?
Yes.
So there's no expansion, no additional buildings, anything like that? But the current, foundation, et cetera,
Yes,
can be
yes,
built on?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, again, it has to be conforming, it has to meet the standards in the text, all of those criteria still stay, but you just don't have to go through the planning board and
Right.
all of those processes.
I think the focus of the chairman's question was, if it stays within the existing building envelope,
Yes,
is that a requirement? And the answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
great, thank you.
So the next one is Unified Development Review, and throughout this process, I think you would all notice that the responsibilities of the planning board have increased quite a bit because a lot of things have been streamlined through the planning board now. So what this process does is that it allows the planning board to grant zoning relief as part of an application for land development. Up till 2016, this was optional, but now it's a required process. And I'll tie this back to the development plan review. So again, in the development plan review, again, if there are any appeals from the planning board, they directly go to the Superior Court. Overall, the role of an administrative officer has broadened. In this case, that would be Mark. And there can be also multiple administrative officers. So again, this is just a way to streamline the process of getting development through. I think everyone has this very large tree of flowchart, but what we are trying to do, this is kind of a teaser before the final project, final diagram, but what it does is lays out the unified development process and the development plan review together, and what the decision points are, what the timelines are, what do you do if you get what do you do if you get a denial, what do you do if you are approved by condition, what type of, if you have a modification and you have something else, where do you go? It lays that out. What we are going to do at the end of this project is mark these with section numbers from the zoning, so you can actually refer back to the actual text of where this came from. So that will tie back in, and I'll let you know what the intention behind not having this right now is. But this is just a reference point. The goal of this flow chart is so that the town and the planning board, and it just makes everyone's job easier to have it as a diagram rather than reading through pages of text. Okay.
Can I ask a question on the
Yes.
flow chart? So, obviously, it's very simplified if the plan review qualifies, right? Then it goes into kind of the simple left-hand side. But it does say, it goes to the zoning officer, and then it says, if the modification is granted, yes, and it goes off to the left, and you get the unified review process. But it also says yes, and it goes off to the left to an administrator officer. Is that because both actions have to occur if the modification is granted? It just seems odd to me that there's two things on the same answer.
Yes, so it goes from the zoning enforcement officer to modification granted, and that is so the yellow, so the zoning enforcement officer will basically decide which process this applies to. Does it need to go through administrative officer, or does it need to, and again, there are conditions in the text to what direction it needs to go.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I would change that box to the typical flowchart symbol is a diamond
Yes,
showing you the decision being made.
and then moving
then-
on.
okay,
Okay,
Thank you,
we'll change that.
thank you.
Supriya, for example, Mr. Chairman, if someone came in for an administrative or minor subdivision now, minor subdivisions no longer go to the planning board, they go to the administrative officer. If that minor subdivision required a modification, that would go to the building official. He would grant the modification, and then it would come back to the administrative officer and go through the administrative review process. If it was a project that required a development plan review, something that would go to the planning board, but it required a modification, it would go to the building official, he would grant the modification, and then it would proceed to the planning board under the plan review. If it's greater than a modification, like a dimensional variance, it would go right into the unified development review process before the planning board, and the building official would be eliminated from the process. I believe his authority is up to 5%?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
So anything over 5%, he wouldn't be able to authorize.
Okay, so the first part you explained can be described using the decision diamond. But the last part you just said is not shown here. It does not show a path that goes around the zone enforcement, and it should have that as well,
Okay.
Okay.
okay? Then, when the plan review does not qualify, and you fall straight into the administrative officer circle there. So if you look on the right, then, you know, you have waivers, formal DPR, et cetera. Are those sequential, like the waivers come first, and then- I mean, or, because you have three paths coming off of that. So if you look, you see to the right of administrator officer, there's waivers, formal DPR, and apply for relief from zoning ordinance. It seems to me that there maybe is a decision going on there also, and that it's not all three things in sequence or something like that, or just all three things in parallel.
Yeah, that's, I believe that's separate things. Is
They're
that
separate
right,
things. It's,
Supriya?
again, missing a diamond there, but it's a decision
I'm
of an
sorry.
administrative
Yeah.
officer to where
So-
it goes.
I
I
correct
grew-
me if I'm wrong, Supriya, but hold a waiver relates to the subdivision regulations,
Yes.
correct? So that would be
Yeah.
if they wanted relief from something that is
Right.
in the subdivision regulations. And
I mean, there might be multiple diamonds that actually.
there could, yeah, there
because I
could,
think it should
yeah,
stack up.
and then, like, the zoning relief would be something that the board would grant under the
Right.
zoning, under its unified plan review. You could have both at the same time. You could have a
Sure.
waiver.
Sure. But just so you know,
Yeah.
I grew up as a software engineer.
Yeah.
I own.
Gary does
Yeah.
flow charts.
Not anymore, but I learned to do them. It was very old school. I did many flow
Yeah.
charts, so I'm fussy about that. Which means if needed, I'm happy to help offline, so.
I do want to ask a question on this, though. We will be moving forward with this and making changes and adding section numbers, but is this a useful tool for the planning board and the town staff to have on hand? Okay.
Yes, I would also recommend just kind of breaking it so that, you know, usually, because there's so much here. You know, like your first page would probably cover the simple stage, and then you could go to another page for
Yeah.
the more complex, you know, when things don't meet modifications, and you might even have to split that. And all you do is just have an arrow going to it, you know, with some tag to
Yeah.
tell you to go to this page, you know, that's all.
Okay.
Because I think that would allow each one to be bigger, especially you're gonna put more information
Yes.
on each one, so.
Okay.
I like both, so I like seeing the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would
yeah.
like to be able to see it more broken down, even just for visual access,
Yeah.
because it's
And I'm-
kind of small.
Pretty
We-
sure with today's technology,
Yeah, yeah.
that can be done.
Yeah.
We can definitely do that. We can also probably color code every single process, and then there's a big diagram, and then you map it out to
Right.
different pages of this is where this came from. So we can definitely do that. But just to know that this is a useful tool, so we should actually go forward developing
Oh,
it
yeah,
more.
this is
Okay.
great.
Okay.
I would think this would be good for applicants too, to look at, because a lot of times they don't know the process. And even for residents that show up and we have to explain the process to them, at least some of them will do the research if we put this on the website, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good education.
And we'll encourage that.
Okay, that's good to know, thank you. So that brings us to the next one, which is comprehensive permit. So this is only available for proposals in which at least 25% of the housing is low or moderate income housing. Again, the process has been streamlined, so there is a new dedicated housing land use calendar in the Superior Code. So any appeals from the local board of review will go to the Superior Code. Again, just to reduce administrative delays, I just want to note that the minimum requirement for the town is 20%. So this is for someone who has come above and beyond than what the town requires, which is 25%. Accessory dwelling units. So what the state did was it provides a uniform definition throughout for what ADUs are. It has set standards for ADUs. Again, ADUs for owner-occupied property up to certain bedroom sizes and footprints is allowed as of right, and it cannot be used for short-term rental. Again, there's more standards and more requirements in the text, but this is just a general overview of what they are. Inclusionary zoning will apply to all subdivisions and land development projects where the net addition is 10 or more housing units. So again, this is where the town limit comes through. So at least 20% of the units within the project should be affordable. Just bringing it back, that comprehensive permit was 25.
So just as a note, currently, or under the old regulations, the town's inclusionary zoning kicked in as a major subdivision, which would be 5 or greater. Now it's going to 10. It was five lots or greater was a major subdivision.
Yeah.
And you need to do 20%, I think, right? Yeah.
You're right.
Thank you. Yeah, 6.
Notice, the next one is notice requirements. So this is not a set chapter, but this is sprinkled text throughout different sections and chapters of both zoning and subdivision regulations. A few of the things that it impacts is comprehensive plan, major land development, variances, and adoptions. I'm just going to highlight a few key changes on this one. So anywhere where there's general circulation, it has now changed to local circulation. There are changes to duration of notice for public hearing. Things need to be posted physically in 2 municipal offices and also on the website. Everywhere, applicant shall bear cost for all the newspaper and mailing, all of those things. Mails need to be sent by first class mail. So just a few things that texts have changed throughout these chapters. Next is variances. So 2 key points on this is that in variances now, the relief granted does not need to be the least relief necessary. So it doesn't have to be the minimum needed. It can be something that's the best choice or the best solution for any applicants that come through for variances. It also removes the rule that hardship cannot mainly come from the applicant's wish to make more money. So previously that wasn't a hardship, but it couldn't be the only hardship, but now it's allowed.
So in terms of the least relief necessary, for example, we just recently had a project where they were looking for relief from our 35-foot height difference to 37, and it was because an existing building is at 37. That seems to imply that if we wanted to, we have the discretion to say, well, we'll give you up to 40.
Yes.
Okay.
So last one, I think the last one is dimensional modifications. So I'll just highlight a few things. So the issuance of dimensional modifications was previously optional. It's not anymore. Dimensional up to 15%, must be allowed. Between 15 to 25 with certain requirements and standards may be allowed. And anything less than 5% of dimensional modifications may be granted without notice. So this is something that can be done administratively by the AO. Do have special use permits. So again, special use permit can be granted with the dimensional variance, and this is where the whole unified development and the development plan review comes into play. This requirement, so in this process, uses previously, if a use was not specifically listed under a special use permit use list, it wouldn't be allowed. But this process, this change now, if it's not listed, it can still be presented. And we need specific and objective criteria of issuance for every single use that is listed in the special use permit category.
I have a question about the last one.
Yes.
For the last one about the objective criteria, is that also depending on what is being issued, and is it available throughout our comprehensive plan? Like I'm trying to imagine or remember what that is. I'm not.
So so special use permit, every use does have a criteria in the zoning text. So if any use is included that this use needs special use permit, it just needs a criteria under it. Like these are the conditions that needs to be fulfilled to grant the special use permit.
Which we have.
Yes.
Right. And was that part of what you were doing to align?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Next steps. So that brings to the end of the process. So right now what we are trying to do is all of these sections were done piecemeal and were brought forward to the planning board in its and bits throughout the last few months. What we are trying to do now is combine all of them together and see how the document reads together, make sure that the formatting is correct. We are going back and forth on drafts, making sure that any impact that the changes have on other sections of zoning are actually recorded, makes sense. And then that's going to the town solicitor to have a final thorough check, and then next step for further adoption by town council. So this is where we are at now. We have all the pieces there, but we are just working through making sure the complete drafts are ready for review.
Okay. I have a question which might be more for you, but in terms of objective criteria and stuff, one of the things we had talked about doing is make sure, and I'll just say because I find it disappointing that on the surface, the comprehensive plan could almost become meaningless. But you can make it meaningful again by putting in very objective criteria instead of subjective, correct?
Yes.
So at some point, how do we identify the places in the comprehensive plan where we need to add objective criteria against all the new, or, rules?
That's a hard question, Gary.
That's,
So,
that's my job.
the way that the process was initially set up in the 80s and the 90s was the comprehensive plan was the general conceptual plan of development for the community. And then based on that plan, the community decided where it wanted types of uses to go and what types of uses it would accept. And then from there, you would go to your zoning ordinance, where you'd get very specific in particular areas and zoning them and creating, the dimensional requirements for use. And then from that, the third step was the subdivision regulations, which was basically more focused on creating plats and subdividing lots and things like that. So the subdivision was based on the zoning, and the zoning was based on the comprehensive plan. Now, I don't want to critique the General Assembly, but basically what they did was they disregarded everything except zoning and said, well, what we want to do is we want to look at zoning and we want to make it easier, not that there's anything wrong with that,
Sure.
and more efficient to get through the process. But they never went back and readdressed the comprehensive plan.
Right.
They just said, oh, by the way,
Because-
your comprehensive plan used to be good for 5 years, now it's good for 10,
Yeah, and.
right?
And
And we're
also-
going to change all the zoning.
And also,
So-
consistency is not a requirement anymore.
Right, consistency is no longer a requirement.
what's
So they got very prescriptive for all communities with their zoning, and almost made it, or trying to make it as uniform as possible from community to community to community. So to put objective criteria in your comp plan, we'd have to go back and just restructure the whole plan.
Oh, okay.
You'd have to go
'Cause
back and
mean,
restructure it.
Because then it can still act, short of the consistency issue, but then it can still act as it should, which is essentially a master plan for the town. It's a guiding document for
Yeah, that's the-
development within the town.
Yes.
Instead of,
It's more,
which means it's the top level, it's the big picture.
Yeah,
Instead of right now, and we're gonna end up building we need to adjust the big picture based on the changes we're making in the details, which is okay, that can be done.
yeah.
But this way, but then it can be used, and then moving forward, any changes you make to the comprehensive plan, we'll just follow that practice.
Yeah,
and then
it's kinda
therefore-
backwards,
and-
but-
But then, once we do this one exercise, which I realize won't be trivial, but then we can do it from top down after that.
Yeah, you could trickle back down.
Right.
Right.
But I just think it's something we have to figure out how to get to that point.
That would be the next stage of the process.
Right. Well, especially because we did make a decision we erred on the side of simple and restrictive.
Yes, that's correct.
And once we do this process, that's what's going to allow us to be less restrictive, which I think
Yeah,
is what
you
we
could go
want to
back,
do.
yeah, at that point, you'd establish those, the comprehensive plan's a policy document. So
Right.
you'd go back and you'd relook at the policies for the community, make whatever adjustments to those policies are necessary. There could be some very prescriptive, like, I'll just take one, for example, when we're talking about open space and preservation of open space, right? It's not very prescriptive in our comprehensive plan what type of
Right.
open space. It just lists open space and says, you should preserve open space. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, so you could go back and say, our focus should be on this type of open space, or open
Yep.
space that links to other, areas here, and not just arbitrarily say, preserve open
Yeah.
space. So that's,
that's
I
a
mean, that's
general
one
idea, but then
example.
here's how we'll do it.
Exactly.
Here's how we'll do it.
We'd set up the criteria for where we should be focusing and what type of space we should be focusing on preserving.
Yep. Okay.
I have a follow-up question to that, and then another one. In terms of the getting specific about an open space plan in our comprehensive plan, can we prioritize that as a board? Like, can we request prioritizing that? Because I know that that's
I
something,
mean, prioritizing reviewing that section
Yeah.
of the, as part of what we're talking about?
Yes.
Oh, sure, I'm fine with that.
Because I know that's something that people in the town feel really
And-
strongly about,
And
and
we run into it on
we don't
many
have a
projects.
plan.
On
Yeah.
many projects.
yeah.
We're, not to go off on a tangent, but we're having those discussions internally currently with the administration as, I know that the town administrator met with the chairman of the Conservation Commission and some other people who, Land Trust, and some other people that have interest in preserving open space to get some input and ideas from them. And the long goal is to do exactly as we're talking about, and that's why I kind of use that as an example, because it's fresh. There may be properties in the town, and we're off on a tangent now, but that are worthy of preservation that the town, as an entity, believes are worthy of preservation. And those should be literally listed in the comprehensive plan.
Yep.
If this property becomes available, the town should try to acquire it.
Yep,
That doesn't exist right now.
that's very
So-
specific, and that's
yeah,
the
so
kind of
that's,
stuff
for
that should be in
example,
there.
what I would be
That's
talking
exactly
about.
right.
And then there could be criteria that, you know,
You know, you could do the same. with-
Prioritize.
You could do the same even on the commercial side, saying here are specific areas where we should be emphasizing opening up more commercial property, right?
or, yeah, or nodes of areas where we would like to see additional commercial expansion,
Right.
where there isn't, I mean, you can look right around the corner up here on 102, there's no water line down 102.
Right, and what do we have to do to support
Which is
it?
constraining the
Exactly.
commercial development. When you go there, you see a new property next to a new property with an old property in between. You're like, why is that there? And it's there because there's no, you know, you're smiling. It's like that because there's no public utilities there
Right.
to accommodate the development.
Right.
And maybe, you know, I'm not from North Smithfield, so I don't want to speak for the town, but maybe that's the desire of the town, is not to extend utilities in that commercial area to constrain the development. I really don't know, but that's a
Right.
conversation that needs to take place.
Right, but either way, I think we can be specific, those two topics, we need to get specific, the way you said, about mentioning specific areas, specific properties, et cetera. So,
Yeah, when you're talking we're talking about the economic development element and the
Right.
land use element when you're talking
Exactly.
about that type of thing.
well, it also allows you to not end up with a hodgepodge of stuff, which is what we have in many areas right now,
You do,
Right.
yeah.
so.
My other question is in terms of the next steps, and knowing that the town council approves these changes. Knowing that this was to align it with state law, what would that review entail? Is it more having them understand what it is, or is there actually a substantive review that they give? Like, I'm just curious what their role is in reviewing
The
it.
council?
Yeah.
So we will be going before the council and presenting to them a track changes document. They'll get it long in advance. We're going to get it to them long in advance when, allow them to digest it, make a presentation. There's a requirement that there's public hearings. The public will be invited. That document will be advertised and posted. You'll be able to see it on the, you know, on the internet or on our webpage. And there will be a dialogue. There'll be a presentation to the council about the specific changes as you've been through incrementally. And they'll make a decision at that point.
Right. Yeah, but I think, to your point, you're right, it is about compliance with state law, so in the end, you could boil it down to, well, we're either going to be in compliance or not. But obviously, we're doing it in a way to make it easy to be in compliance. But I feel that that process is important, because if nothing else, I mean, it does two things. It educates, and it puts a fresh set of eyes on it, because we're in it deep, and now they start looking at the changes, and then they can question, and maybe some changes come out of it, or we can be better worded, you know, those kind of things.
Well, and because I wanted to point out that I thought I liked how you highlighted about, or you did, I'm sorry, about the pines, for example, just as an example. I think when going through that process, it would be really good to lift up examples like that, because if residents come to those hearings and then the town council, it just gets everyone on the same page, because I think people can get whipped up about things and then they don't even know what the
Well, that's-
facts are.
Yeah, that's what
And-
happened with
yeah.
the adaptive reuse.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just, you know, it's.
That's
pretty
what social
clearly
media
stated.
is for, to confuse all the facts
Yeah.
and present
Well, because-
misinformation,
because
right?
it
That's what
allows-
that
cause
Does.
anybody to declare themselves an expert, you know?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, by all means, make a motion to open public hearing.
And a second?
Second.
Those in favor? Yes, okay. The public hearing is open at 6:40.
Would it be possible to get a copy
Could-
of the breakdown of each of these categories,
Yes, of course.
based on the slides? Do you have it?
The doc, yeah, okay,
It just provides a
yes.
more in-depth explanation.
So how,
I can forward the presentation to the town and they can,
And the other question,
well, how will we get it to you then? Oh, okay, great. I know, I just want to make sure. Yeah, I know, I just want to make sure.
the other thing is,
yes.
is there a legend associated with these shapes and colors?
I'm
I'm picking up
Ah.
the red diamonds I've denied.
I'll make sure to add
No.
that to you.
No, the colors and the shapes are not related in a flow chart.
Yeah. The-
The shapes, I mean, you could look up flow chart symbols, okay? And you will see there's a standard that's been around since the 1950s or whatever for flow charts. Like a diamond is a decision point, you know, boxes, you know, there's actions, it's a very simple process.
We will make sure to add a legend and I'll
But-
send the updated document.
But the color coding is important because you're right, that's where it's grouping similar things together. The colors mean something, yeah.
Phil, I think as far as the denial, right, so at any stage of any application, there's a potential of a denial. And, you know, while Supri was doing that, I actually circled all of those, right? Because they're all the same. And so basically, I think the emphasis there is, should a project be denied, the process, now, it no longer, like if the planning board used to deny something, it would go to the zoning board, right? And then the zoning board would be the Board of Appeal, and then it would have to go to the Superior Court. Now, everything, upon a denial, in the recording of the decision, 20-day appeal period, right to Superior Court. And so you'll see they all say the same thing.
So that's again, where, as you're improving this,
Yes.
they actually, all the places where it can be denied, if they are denied, it should flow to one place that says,
Yeah.
you know, 20 days appeal, Supreme Court, Superior Court, right?
Yes.
And then, that'll simplify this a lot. You know, in software, that would be a subroutine,
Yeah.
just so you know.
We have an IT software person looking at this as we do it, so
There you go.
I'll make sure to bring the comments to it.
Because if one of my software engineers developed code based on that, I'd be having a talk with them. But I understand.
Yeah.
It's another language unto itself.
Yes. I do better with text than flowcharts.
Yes, gotcha.
Okay. That's all I had, I guess.
Are there any more comments? No?
Move to close the public hearing.
And a second, please? Second, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
The public hearing is closed at 6:43.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think we're at that magical point.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
with no further matters before the board, I move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. And we have a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. The meeting is closed at 6:44.